It's Warren Vanderhill with the Center for Middletown Studies project on Muncie's service providers, and today I'm speaking with Lindsey Arthur. The date is October 15th, 2018. Lindsey is the CEO of Muncie Habitat for Humanity, and I want to begin by thanking you for your willingness to participate in our research project. And I'd like to begin with your life, sort of put on the Wayback Machine here for a little bit and tell me about your background, your life story, things that you did before you came to Muncie and what brought you to Muncie.
Well, my story in some ways started in Muncie, actually. I grew up in a small town in Michigan, and my father was a farmer and my mother was a nurse. And I went to...
What's the town?
Near Reading, Michigan is actually the name of the town. Okay. Near Hillsdale and Coldwater, in between, right in between. And growing up in a small community, I wanted to go to the big city and go to school. So I actually went to Taylor University in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I got an intercultural studies degree there. And after I graduated there, I met the man of my dreams and we got married, moved to Muncie, Indiana. There I started my master's degree at Ball State University in Student Affairs Administration. And from my time at Ball State, we collectively decided that Muncie would be our home and that we wanted to make our place here in this community in an underserved neighborhood. So we bought a house south of downtown and decided to make our home there and to begin to get to know neighbors, begin to get to understand the city and what goes on here and become a part of a neighborhood. From there, I actually started working at Habitat for Humanity as an AmeriCorps member. I committed to 1 year of service there to help to provide an education curriculum for first-time home buyers that would be purchasing homes with Habitat for Humanity. And I also worked with volunteers, obviously from all walks of life, at Muncie Habitat. So I've been with the organization actually 16 years, and I have done every job there was to do at Muncie Habitat until about 10 years ago when I was asked to become the CEO of the organization. And so I've enjoyed my process in working in a not-for-profit in a very direct and hands-on way for about 16 years.
It's important for me, I guess, to inject at this point that you and your husband are the only couple that are involved in our research project, because last year your husband, we were very fortunate to interview him for our Faith Communities project. So you met him when you were at Taylor?
Yes, yeah, we did.
Yeah. Where's he from?
He's actually from Parker City.
That's right.
Yes, yeah.
From the interview. How have the services that Habitat provides changed over the past, couple of decades? You've been there quite a while. You've been CEO for 16 years. Obviously, you've seen a lot of changes in the Muncie community, but what changes specifically have there been in the mission of Habitat?
Yeah, Muncie Habitat for Humanity has changed tremendously in the 16 years I've been with the organization. We really began our work focused on individual families, and we wanted to lift families up, to give them a hand up and not a handout, to be able to empower them to own a home when it wouldn't have otherwise been in their future. And through that process, we really served a very specific need for those individual families. And we served them all over Delaware County. And through our strategic planning process and through really envisioning a bigger, broader scope for our work, we began to challenge ourselves to think about what we do for one family, how does that impact a whole of a neighborhood? And in challenging ourselves, we began to realize that serving one family is beautiful. And it's terrific for those parents, those children, to have a home, to have stability. But we know that it impacts neighborhoods. And so we began to say, how can we serve neighborhoods as a whole? And what would it look like to begin to concentrate our work to focus it and to build a bigger collective impact by working with other organizations and other collaborators to really make a difference in the community. So about 3 to 5 years ago, our board, through their strategic planning process, began to think about not only building homes, but building community and ultimately achieving our big dream of building hope and building hope throughout Muncie, but also with individual families.
Okay. Is this initiative for Habitat a Muncie initiative or a national initiative?
It's both. Habitat for Humanity International challenged affiliates that, like us, where it's appropriate to begin thinking about intensifying work within a specific target area. Muncie is specific and unique because we are one of about 200 of those Habitat for Humanity affiliates that has taken that deeper dive into focusing on neighborhood revitalization. Okay. And also within that, Habitat for Humanity International is starting to peer into the work that we're doing here in Muncie, and we have been chosen to be one of 10 communities that will be studied for the next 5 years to see if we can actually prove that quality of life is being improved through our neighborhood revitalization work. So it's a both and. It is a Muncie specific because our board felt that neighborhoods were important, but it's also a Habitat International who has said, you know what, that something special is happening in Muncie. We want to watch this change. We want to measure it. We want to collect data, and we're happy to be a part of one of those 10 communities.
Well, let me be a bit more specific. Here's Habitat and here's a block. And the old way of looking at this, I guess, is here's a house that we're going to build on a lot in a block.
Yes.
Now you're looking at the block.
Correct.
And so you really have, I guess I would say, the economic power to take on not just a house that's one of 7 on a block, but the entire area.
Yes. And I think that changed for us in that we began to expand our programs. So whereas in years past we would serve one family with home ownership, and we would focus on that, now we're looking at that entire block, and we have additional programs that can help homeowners make repairs on their homes. So that's an expansion of services that we have gone through, where we now are also able to serve homeowners who have owned their home for years, but because of age or disability or income, have not been able to maintain them. So we're helping to make some needed improvements with them for their homes. And then we're looking at the block as a whole, and we're saying, are there neighbors there that need to be empowered to take leadership roles in their community? Are there neighbors in that block that rely on one another? How can they depend on each other more? And what does quality of life mean for that entire block? Sometimes it means boarding up a vacant, abandoned home. Sometimes it means tearing down a home. Sometimes it means making repairs for those homeowners or building a new house. And so at this point, Habitat's able to offer all of those things and really maintain focus on empowering the neighbors and the residents who live there so that they can take charge of their neighborhood.
Okay. Where is this area for the people who are going to watch this? We know, you know, I know, but could you be more specific about where is this exactly located in Muncie?
Sure. Habitat for Humanity selected a target area that was south of downtown and actually very close to where the Chevrolet plant was closed on 8th Street. And so we call this target area the 812 Coalition area. And it's bordered by 8th Street in the north and Memorial or 12th Street in the south, Madison Street on the east, and Perkins on the west. And so it's kind of a long, skinny rectangle area just south of downtown.
Okay. Was there a specific reason why you chose that area?
Yeah, we actually chose that area based upon other investment that we were seeing. One, on part of neighbors. There was a neighborhood association beginning to spring up in that area. There were also local funders who had taken interest in revitalizing the Ross Community Center, which is right in the middle of our target area. And we were beginning to hear that concentrating, collaborating, that obviously funders cared a lot about that, but also other not-for-profits were being energized and interested in coming together. And so that's really why we selected that area was, one, there was a need. Habitat also could provide some services that would be needed in that area. And then also there were strong resources within the neighborhood, within neighbors who cared and wanted to see change, but they maybe just needed a little help. And then also the investment from the other wider community.
Who lives there? What do people do who live in that area?
That's a really good question. It has been a transient area for a while, but it's also an area that's going through great change. After the factory closed on 8th Street, I think a lot of those families were left wondering what is their future and where are they going to go? Where will they be employed? And that generations who had become used to having a small neighborhood that they could work in, they could play in, they could eat and go to church and have their whole system right there in that neighborhood, that that really was gone. So I would say that for now, we know data-wise that this 812 Coalition area has a low education rate. Has actually a very, very low income rate for households, and they tend to be about 30% rental and about 30% homeowners. And so it's an interesting mix of demographics when you look at that area.
Yeah. How's your relationship with your clients changed over the time that you've been involved with Habitat?
I think that the relationship that we've had with our families that we serve at Muncie Habitat has actually not changed a whole lot in the 16 years that I've been there. I think that for me, the one thing that I have always appreciated and always admired about Habitat for Humanity and its mission is that it's a deep focus and it's a deep dive and it's intense with a small number of families. Right now we're serving 5 to 7 homeownership families and about 10 to 15 repair families. And we spend a lot of time getting to know them, building them up, working alongside them, and continuing to provide that hand up and not a handout. And so the relationship building piece has always been there. I think that I've known that it was impactful, but I think that I begin to see it in a more tangible way now, that we have had a beautiful opportunity to really empower those families, to get to know them, to really understand their needs, and to serve them in a very, very specific way. So I would say that relationship hasn't changed. I would say that it is a much needed relationship in many cases for those families. They've needed the opportunity to have more people to rely on, to build trust again in relationship with others, and to begin to see themselves as strong and capable and confident, and that they have the ability to take charge of their lives.
This may be a little bit off the track of the larger picture we're dealing with here, but as an individual, or a family, how do they come to you and be considered for a Habitat house, or even now for repair?
Sure. We have 3 very basic criteria that we select every family for either home ownership or repairs. And the first would be their need for that. They would not be able to own a home if it wasn't for Habitat. They're living in conditions that they shouldn't be, overcrowded or inadequate. And then we also look at their ability to repay, because you'll remember with Habitat, every family repays a no-interest mortgage. So this house is not free to them. So we do verify their income, and we look at their credit and determine that it's an adequate risk for us to take. This is also the time that I remind folks that we serve people that banks normally would not serve. And so whether because of income or credit, we have chosen that that's a good risk for us to take. And then the third thing we look for is their willingness to partner with us, that they can do the sweat equity hours that are required, that they can attend the education classes, that they can save for that down payment. And that's true with our repair program as well, those three basic things.
What are the main goals of your?
Sorry.
No, what are the main goals of Habitat?
The main goals of Habitat are to build homes, communities, and hope.
Okay.
And we do that through a series of programs, home ownership or repairs, or really focusing deeply on neighborhood revitalization. At this point in time, our goal for our strategic plan over the next 3 years is to serve more families. And we have to do that by raising more money, by
We'll get to that.
yes, by raising more money and by finding more volunteers who will come alongside our partners and our families to build or repair those homes.
So the challenge you're really trying to address focuses specifically on home ownership, but then all the things that are part of someone owning a home or
Sure.
repairing a home.
Sure. Yeah, I think that the challenge we're trying to address is often a big challenge, and it's very complex. And that is helping to alleviate the day-to-day stresses of a low-income family who finds themselves in a position where home ownership or stability is out of reach. And so we are beginning to see families be empowered through home ownership that would not normally have had that opportunity. And I think it's because of that no interest loan that we offer, that it's very, very affordable for families to be able to own a home. And then you layer that on top of creating home ownership, and you create more homeowners in a concentrated area, you begin to see a neighborhood that can find stability as well. A neighborhood that maybe has had a transient population or that has had change like the neighborhoods we're seeing, or has just had a sense of hopelessness. And when you begin to bring stability to a neighborhood like that, you can begin to see quality of life being improved. And quality of life is different for each of us, whatever that looks like. However, I think that what we are seeing is that for individuals, they can honestly say, my quality of life is being improved because, one, I feel connected to my neighbors. I know I can rely on them. And I know that we're empowered to make change right here in our neighborhood. And when we can see those things come together, I think that's the ultimate goal we're trying to accomplish for a neighborhood here in Muncie, also neighbors abroad, through our neighborhood revitalization work. Those are the types of goals we're trying to accomplish.
Well, it just seems logical that doing this as a neighborhood makes much more sense than having one house on a block where all the other neighbors might be in various different economic and social conditions. I mean, the neighborhood idea gives you some way of seeing this as a kind of a total concept than having one house on a block.
And I think that what we have seen over the years is that one house on one street matters. And it matters for that family. And that family has higher education rates and lower divorce rates and more stability. They're creating equity for the first time. And all those things are beautiful. But one house on one street is for one family. And how can we begin to expand that and continue to layer on more families that are all finding stability, creating that network, and beginning to then ultimately improve their quality of life, which is improving the quality of life for a whole neighborhood. And that's the beauty of this neighborhood work that we're doing.
Well, it seems to me that the repair initiative would be really attractive to people. If you're going to have somebody with a Habitat house and you're going to offer repair possibilities to, I don't know, 7 or 8 other neighbors on that block, that seems to be something that would be a very attractive thing to the other people who are on that block.
Yeah, and we often find that when we're building a home, we see our neighbors that are on either sides of those homes starting to improve their own home. We see them sort of wanting a higher standard for their property. But I would also say that some of the neighborhoods we're working in have always struggled with equity and appraisals for those homes. So whereas a family maybe living there, maybe owns their own home, they don't have enough equity in their home in order to fix the roof or make the siding repair that's needed. And now that we're working in conjunction with existing homeowners who maybe just need a little bit of help, we're able then to layer those services together and to begin to actually see a huge visual improvement in the whole of the neighborhood.
What do you think of what I call the root causes of the challenges that your families face?
I think that many of the root causes that our families face can come from generations. Generations of not having the educational resources or not having the vision to see more for themselves and for their families. I think that some things come from low income families not finding a stable wage or a living wage. I think that we see that time and time again. How do families survive on $8 or $10 an hour? They don't. They don't very well.
They don't.
I also think that there are some things that hold families back, and they're small. They seem small, but I think that there are times that our families not having access to banking, for instance, or not knowing that they have access to banking, not using the bank services, they pay more for simple things like checks getting cashed, bills getting paid. And you continue to create that cycle over and over. I also think that there's a lack of understanding about credit. I think that sometimes families in low income situations or even in working poor situations, they don't understand the impact of not paying that one bill or those two bills on time, or when those disconnect notices come from the utilities from when you moved before, that those things continue to layer into their credit, which then actually harms them. But what they've been focused on has been maybe the day-to-day things, or taking care of their children, or maintaining their job, which you can kind of see how you maintain one thing and not all of them at the same time. So I think that there are things like that. So then your credit, for instance, affects whether or not you can own a home. And then sometimes it affects the premium that you pay on your insurance. And so then your homeowner's insurance, if you're able to get a home with an organization like Habitat, your homeowner's insurance is more because your credit was not so good. Because, you just continue to layer on these things that I think are systemic and that kind of hold families back from actually being able to save more money and provide financially for their family in different ways.
So you help people navigate this system, as I would call it?
Yes, we do.
That's what you're really talking about. You're talking about a system, and people get outside of it, and they don't know how to get back in. And so what I gather, groups like Habitat have to help them navigate the whole credit system.
And often what we have found recently has been that there have been numerous families who will apply to own a home with Habitat, and we have disqualified them. And we would say, what we see are these three good things, but we also need you to work on this fourth thing, which is your credit. And you've got 6 things on your credit that you need to have repaired. Well, credit repair is a long-term process and can take lots of years. And so then that family, we've encouraged that family to do the right things with their credit. And we are finding right now that more families are actually listening to us, and they're working on their credit repair, and 1 year or 2 years or 3 years later are coming back to us applying for housing again. And we are able to serve them with just by making those minor changes in their financial situation, and doing some credit repair over a lot of years, they're actually able to qualify for a home. And so we're seeing that people who we're serving right now are kind of standing up with that testimony of, I was disqualified 3 times, I was denied 3 times, and I kept working on these things that they told me to work on, and here I am today, able to own a home. But what that means to me is that they've had to see their future story.
Sure.
They've had to be willing to think about a goal that's far off, that's not attainable today, and they have to keep it in sight, and they have to know that working on it incrementally is actually going to produce a change that can be accomplished in the future. And I think that that's a testimony to a lot of our families and their stamina, their desire for stability, but also that future story that could be different than it is today.
Well, you use the word generation, and I think that that's a great deal of this, where you're dealing with people who don't come from generations, maybe even 1 or 2, where families were concerned about having good credit and doing the kinds of things that you're trying to teach them to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it takes time. It really takes time.
What problems have you had to switch us a little bit in finding staff or expertise for people to work with Habitat?
I think that Habitat for Humanity is a unique organization where we rely heavily upon volunteers.
Right.
Volunteers to build our homes, to help renovate or repair homes, and volunteers really to mentor families. And I think that the challenge in finding staff tends to come from people not having a volunteer experience or not having a background of working with volunteers. And you can imagine that it's hard enough to do your job and to serve the families that we serve, let alone trying to do that with unskilled volunteers. And so I think that from time to time that has been a big hurdle for us, is really finding people who can effectively work with volunteers to accomplish our mission.
But I think you've been very fortunate in having a lot of people, I'm kind of chuckling here, who have university affiliation, could also use a hammer and a
Yes,
nail.
that's right. Absolutely.
Yeah, have been really dedicated to working with Habitat.
Yeah.
Tell me about your budget. I mean, what are the sources of Habitat's budget?
Sure. Well, I think we're special and unique, and I'm thankful for the way in which our organization is funded. We do write a lot of grants and have a lot of local foundation support, but we also have support from individuals who, whether they give an annual gift or a monthly gift, those individual donations are about 1/3 of our budget. And then we also have business partnerships, relationships with them. We get some money from our local government through community development block grants or home funds through the community development office. We also have, if you'll remember, we have families who are making a monthly mortgage payment back to the organization, helping to serve more families. And then, of course, we have revenue from our Restore. Our Restore is really one way that we sell new and gently used home improvement items to the public, which then creates more revenue for our organization. And of course, lastly, we partner a lot with churches in the community.
My next question.
Yes, churches actually provide a lot of support for us. And whether that's through volunteerism or through an annual missions gift or through some type of special offering, churches actually have a huge role to play with Habitat.
Okay. Let me jump to that question then, which is my final question, and we'll go back and fill in a couple of others. But are there specific churches, faith communities that you have more contact with than others in Muncie?
Sure. Yeah, we have a small, dedicated group of churches who actually give a tremendous amount to us. And they actually have believed so much in the mission of our organization, and that by them investing in our work, that they're able to actually see God's love be provided to families within our community. And so I think that there are some congregations that are able to make a financial contribution to this organization. And then there are lots of congregations also that commit typically to either one building day or up to 5 building days, and work a whole week with us to accomplish any of the tasks that need to be done that week, which is a huge blessing to us.
Who are some of these churches?
You want me to name drop?
A few.
Yeah,
Well,
okay.
willing to. Yeah, a little name dropping
Sure.
never hurts. Yeah.
We actually have a really wonderful partnership with the Gathering Church.
Yeah.
Also First Presbyterian Church, First Baptist and First Brethren, Hazelwood. We also have a great relationship with University Christian Church, some congregations like that.
Yeah. Now, do you solicit these? I mean, what's your modus operandi when it comes to getting involvement of specific faith communities?
Sure. We do solicit partnerships with churches, and but we've also been blessed over the years. Our organization actually started in the faith community here in Muncie because we believed that every man, woman, and child needed the opportunity to own a home, and that Habitat was a good way for that to happen. And so local pastors were the people who got together in order to make this organization actually happen. And so within that, we have had good relationships with those churches for the over 3 decades that we've been around. But we're always looking to expand that. We're always looking for more volunteers, more financial support in order to achieve our mission. So we're constantly, I think we have a nice package we can offer to a church that is physical in nature, work with your hands, but also we know that it there's a spiritual component to it where families are served with a house, but they're also encouraged and supported, and that when that tangible need is met, they can start to think about the other parts of their life that also have needs.
How do you gain access to this funding that you have? I mean, obviously there are multiple sources that you have, and how do you access that? I mean, what's the method of doing that?
Sure. I think obviously relationship is a big deal.
Okay.
And continuing to tell our story throughout the community has been the thing that has probably opened more doors for us. I think also with our collaboration, I think that local funders, local churches, individuals like to see that we are not working in a silo, that we are also starting to attack some systemic problems. And we're working towards total neighborhood revitalization. And with that, I think it's opened doors to people who are very, very interested in seeing the big impact that we can have when we're working with other organizations.
Is your organization impacted in any way by what I've come to call local, state, and federal regulations?
We are, actually. And we've had some big changes since 2008, 2009, when the mortgage crisis actually happened.
Yeah, right.
We're an organization who actually has to follow all of the federal guidelines in terms of any lender, just like a bank would, because we are the lender. Habitat for Humanity writes mortgages and sells homes to families for no interest. And so with that, all of the sweeping federal regulations that came down after the 2008-2009 housing crisis, we've had to follow all of those things as well. So I'd say that we have become a lot more specific and a lot more careful about the way in which we write mortgages. There have been a lot of national support that we've gained from Habitat International, as well as our state office, that are watching all of those federal things, listening to those, and making sure that we're following the guidelines as we should be, and that every person is treated fairly and equally and equitably.
So these are more federal regulations than they would be state or local?
Yes.
Okay. What, do you have relationships with the banks in the community?
We do, actually. The banks in the community are very, very supportive of our work. They financially contribute to us, but they also have helped us to gain access to our equity. And when I say that, I mean we write a lot of mortgages. And in writing that, we have a huge asset portfolio, and we
Yeah.
have been able to sell some of those assets to local banks. And those mortgages then continue to remain no interest for the family, but it gives us access to that cash that we would not have normally had, that we basically would have gotten a monthly payment for over the next 20 years.
Okay.
So those relationships have been good for us, to be able to access that
I mean,
asset.
that's always been the case, that the relationship between Habitat and the banks has been pretty good in terms of the support.
Yes.
Okay.
And we actually are serving, we're serving families that banks wouldn't normally serve.
Yeah, right.
And so we're not necessarily competing for the same families in that same way. And I think sometimes the banks scratch their heads that we're able to be so successful. We've served over 130 families, and we've foreclosed on 6 of them.
Oh, my God.
So, that's a pretty good success
Yeah,
rate.
it's pretty enviable.
Yeah.
Well, those are all the formal questions I have, but
Okay.
at the end of our interviews, I always want to be sure that I give the person I'm speaking with an opportunity to add anything that you might like to add in terms of this very impressive story regarding the work of Habitat in Muncie.
Well, thank you. I think that for me, it's just been an honor to serve at an organization like this, and one that actually has gained so much support from the community and really relies on it. We're an organization that cannot accomplish our mission without the support of our community. We don't build houses alone. We build them in partnership with families. Those families have to trust us. Our volunteers, though, also help to build those homes. And
Yeah,
so without
right.
volunteers, without the funding, without those families, we would not be a successful organization. And so I'm grateful that we've gained the support that we have and that we can really rely on the community as a whole, and engage the community as a whole within the organization in order to serve our families.
This would be a small point, but when you talk about people who get a Habitat house, and I suppose this would apply to the repair program you have now too, they have to put in, there's sweat equity involved in
Yes.
this. They have to put in so many hours.
Yes.
I mean, how do you determine how many hours the people are going to put in?
Yeah, we actually require 250 hours per adult family member.
Okay.
So if you have a 2-person household,
Yeah.
you would have 500 hours to do. And it's actually, it's kind of like a part-time job, I'd say,
Yeah,
for many
it's a lot.
families. They tend to work a lot of weekends alongside volunteers.
Okay.
But I think one of the things that's so neat is that that's opened our families up to a network of resources that they wouldn't have had before. We've had families who have worked alongside a group of volunteers, and that group of volunteers was from a local business.
Right.
And they have seen the work ethic of that family, and they have offered them jobs. And so we've seen our family's income improve just from volunteering alongside a group of people from a business or an organization. And that's actually happened countless times. We've seen our partner families who have had resources and who to call when I needed something.
Right.
And they begin to build those relationships with folks that they would have never come in contact with. People who are from a church or a congregation or a business that they would have never had that relationship with, had Habitat job site, or had that that volunteer experience had not come together. It's a pretty neat story.
It is a pretty neat story, a very impressive one. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time and telling us the story of Muncie Habitat for Humanity.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.